There is a particular kind of man the world decides is safe to underestimate. He does not drive the car that announces him. He does not wear the watch that explains him. He does not walk into rooms expecting them to rearrange themselves around his presence. He just moves through the world quietly, doing his work, loving his people, trusting that what he has built means something. I was that man for 53 years. And for 53 years, that trust was the most expensive thing I owned. Welcome back to Father's Revenge Stories. Pull up a chair, pour yourself something. The people in these stories were given something most people want, a family that loved them, and they chose not to. Leave a comment, subscribe if this is your first time here. If you've been here before, thank you for coming back. What they did with that is what we're here to talk about. My name is Raymond Gale. I am a civil engineer by trade and a patient man by necessity. I spent 26 years designing bridges, literal ones, the kind that carry weight across distance without failing, for a mid-sized firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. I retired at 51 when the firm was acquired, and I was offered a buyout number that made it easy to say goodbye. I took it. I bought a modest house on a half-acre lot in Concord, planted a vegetable garden that my neighbors find amusing, and I settled into the kind of quiet life that people describe as simple when they mean small. I do not correct them. My wife Diana had been beside me for 22 years. She was a landscape architect. She worked with living things the way I worked with concrete and steel, always thinking about what a structure would look like 10 years from now, 20 years, after the seasons had done their work on it. She was careful and precise, and she had a laugh that filled whatever room she was standing in. Or so I believed. The thing about being a bridge engineer is that you develop a very specific sensitivity to stress. You learn to read the places where a structure is carrying more load than it was designed for. The hairline fractures, the subtle shifts in alignment that nobody notices until the morning everything gives way. Looking back, the fractures had been there for 2 years. I had just chosen not to read them. The call came on a Tuesday morning in October. I was in the garage reorganizing my tool bench, the kind of project that sounds productive, but is really just a man giving his hands something to do while his mind sits quietly with itself. My phone was on the workbench beside a can of mineral spirits and a rag. The number was local, a Charlotte area code I did not recognize. I picked up. "Mr. Gale?" The voice was young, male, careful in the way a person is careful when they are about to say something they have rehearsed. "My name is Marcus Webb. I manage the Harrington House restaurant in Dilworth. We hosted your anniversary dinner last Saturday." I set down the wrench I was holding. "Yes, I remember. Is something wrong?" A pause, the kind that has weight in it. "Sir, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me about the answer. Are you somewhere private right now?" My hand tightened on the phone. "I'm in my garage," I said, "alone." "Is Mrs. Gale in the house?" I looked at the door that connected the garage to the kitchen. Closed. "She is," I said. "What is this about, Marcus?" Another pause, shorter, like he had made a decision. "Mr. Gale, we do a standard security review of our private dining rooms after every event. It's policy. We check the footage, make sure nothing was damaged or taken, log the room as cleared." He stopped. "Sir, our private dining room has a camera positioned near the emergency exit. It covers the far corner of the room. Most guests don't notice it. It's not prominently marked." I said nothing. "Your party was the last booking in that room on Saturday. The camera continued recording after your group left. Standard 30-minute buffer before it autosaves." He exhaled slowly. "Mr. Gale, there are 2 people on that footage that I believe you know, and what they did in that room after you left. Sir, I don't feel right sitting on this without telling you. But I also did not want to call you with Mrs. Gale standing beside you. The garage was very quiet. Somewhere outside, a neighbor's lawnmower started up. Ordinary Tuesday sounds. The world going about its business. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said. I put the phone in my pocket. I stood at the workbench for a moment, looking at the tools hung on the pegboard in front of me. 22 years. That is 8,030 days. That is roughly 192,000 hours. That is the accumulation of 10,000 ordinary mornings and 2,000 arguments resolved and 400 dinners where we sat across from each other and talked about nothing important and everything that mattered. I picked up my keys. I walked back through the kitchen. Diana was at the dining table with her laptop, working on a site plan for a client. She looked up when I came in. "Heading somewhere?" "Hardware store," I said. "I need a new set of drill bits. The 1/4 is shot." She looked at me for half a second longer than necessary. "I can come if you want company." "I'm fine," I said pleasantly. "I'll be an hour." She nodded and went back to her screen. I walked out the front door. I did not look back. The Harrington house sat on a quiet street in Dilworth, the kind of neighborhood that had been quietly beautiful for decades without needing to announce it. Dark wood exterior, window boxes. The sort of place that made you speak in lower voices when you walked in. Marcus Webb met me at the service entrance. He was younger than his voice, mid-20s, trim, with the particular alertness of someone who has been carrying a difficult thing and is finally about to put it down. He shook my hand. His grip was firm but apologetic. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Gale. I'm sorry to do it this way." "Show me," I said. He led me through the back corridor to a small office behind the kitchen. A single monitor on a desk, a rolling chair. He gestured for me to sit, typed a code into the keyboard, and pulled up the file. "The timestamp starts at 9:52 p.m., he said. "Your party left around 9:40. The room was empty until—" He pressed play and stepped back. I watched. The camera angle was wide and slightly elevated, covering the far corner of the private dining room. The table was still set, glasses half empty, napkins folded, the remnants of a dinner that had cost me $400 and a carefully made reservation. At 9:54, the door opened. My brother walked in. Gerald Gale, 56 years old, 4 years older than me. The man who had given the toast at my wedding. The man who called me every Sunday without fail. The man who had been my emergency contact on every medical form I had ever filled out since our parents died. He was still in the jacket he had worn to dinner. He sat down at the table. At 9:56, the door opened again. Diana came in. She had changed out of her heels into the flats she kept in her purse. The small, practical detail that I had always found endearing. The way she planned for comfort. The way she always thought, one step ahead. She sat across from Gerald. They did not speak immediately. They looked at each other the way people look at each other when there is too much to say and they are trying to find the beginning of it. Then Gerald reached across the table and covered Diana's hand with his. She let him. She did not pull away. She turned her hand over and held his back. I sat in Marcus Webb's office chair and watched my wife hold my brother's hand across the table, where we had just celebrated our 22nd anniversary, and I felt something happen in my chest that I do not have the right word for. Not anger, not grief, something structural, the feeling of a load-bearing thing giving way quietly and completely, the way a bridge sounds in the moment before it falls. But the footage was not finished. "Keep watching," Marcus said quietly from behind me. His voice was careful, the voice of someone who knows the worst is still coming. On the screen, Diana was speaking. The camera had no audio, but I had spent 22 years reading this woman's face, and I did not need sound. She was crying, not dramatically, the private kind. The kind she only let herself do when she believed no one was watching. Gerald said something. She shook her head. He said something else. She pressed her free hand flat on the table, her thinking gesture, the one she used when she was working through something that had no clean solution. Then she reached into her purse. She pulled out a document, folded in thirds. She unfolded it on the table between them. I leaned forward. Marcus reached past me and zoomed the footage. The resolution was good, better than I wanted it to be. It was a property listing. A house. The address was in Asheville, 2 hours west of Charlotte, up in the mountains. I could see the price point in the corner of the page. Gerald pointed to something on the document. Diana nodded. He reached into his jacket pocket. He produced a pen. She signed. She folded the document, put it back in her purse. Gerald stood. He pulled her up with him. He held her for a long moment. Not a romantic embrace, something older and more complicated than that. The embrace of two people who have been carrying something together for longer than they should have. Then she pulled back. She smoothed her dress. She took a breath, and she walked out of the room. Gerald sat back down. He poured himself the last of the wine from the bottle on the table. He held the glass without drinking it and looked at nothing in particular. Then he finished the wine, set the glass down carefully, and left. The room sat empty. Marcus reached past me and stopped the footage. I stared at the frozen image of the empty dining room. "The property listing," I said. "Do you know if—" "I had a colleague look it up this morning," Marcus said quietly. "I'm sorry. It sold 6 weeks ago. Purchased under a trust name. Gale Family Holdings." I sat very still. Gale Family Holdings. That was my trust. The legal entity I had established 15 years ago to hold retirement assets. The entity for which both Diana and Gerald served as co-trustees, a decision I had made without a second thought because they were the two people in the world I trusted completely. "How much?" I asked. Marcus handed me a printed sheet. I looked at the number. $640,000. The approximate liquidation value of the Blue Ridge rental property portfolio I had spent 11 years building inside that trust. 4 properties, 11 years. Quietly, methodically, the way an engineer builds anything, one load-bearing element at a time. I folded the sheet, put it in my jacket pocket. I sat there for a moment longer. I thought about the Sunday calls. Every week, without fail. Gerald asking how I was doing, how Diana was, how the garden was coming along. I thought about how easy it had been to read those calls as love. I thought about Diana at the dining table this morning, her eyes on my face half a second longer than usual. Not suspicion, calculation. She had been checking the temperature of the room, making sure I did not know. I stood up. "Marcus," I said, "I need a copy of this footage on a secure drive." "Already prepared." He handed me a USB drive from the desk drawer. "Mr. Gale, I have to ask, are you all right?" I considered the question. "No," I said honestly, "but I will be." I buttoned my jacket. "Don't mention this call to anyone," I said. "Not your staff, not anyone who inquired about that room. If anyone asks, I came in to dispute a line item on the bill." He nodded. "Of course." I shook his hand. "You're a good man, Marcus," I said. "Thank you." I walked out through the service entrance into the October morning. The air was cold and clean. I sat in my car for 3 minutes. Then I called the only person I needed to call. Her name was Patricia Osei. She had been my attorney for 14 years. She had handled the trust formation, the property acquisitions, every significant financial decision I had made since retirement. She was methodical, precise, and completely without sentiment when the situation called for it. She picked up on the 3rd ring. "Raymond, what's wrong?" Not a question. She had known me long enough to hear the register of my voice. "I need you to pull the full transaction history on the Gale Family Holdings Trust going back 18 months, I said. "Every movement, every authorization. And Patricia, I need you to tell me how a property sale inside that trust gets executed without my signature. A pause. Raymond, a co-trustee can authorize a sale if the trust documents allow for independent co-trustee action. It depends on how the original instrument was drafted. I closed my eyes briefly. And how was mine drafted? A longer pause. I heard her keyboard. Raymond, her voice had changed. Your trust instrument includes an independent action clause. Either co-trustee can authorize a transaction up to a defined threshold without requiring dual signatures. What is the threshold? $750,000. $640,000. Just under the line. Not an accident. They knew the threshold, I said. Raymond, who is they? My wife and my brother, I said. Pull everything, Patricia. I need to know every transaction, every transfer, every disbursement going back 24 months. And I need you to freeze any further independent action on that trust, effective immediately. I can have an emergency restriction filed within the hour, she said. Her voice was steady, professional. The voice of a woman who had seen difficult things and knew how to stand beside them. Raymond, how long have you known? About 40 minutes, I said. And Diana doesn't know you know? No. What are you going to do? I looked out the windshield at the quiet Dilworth Street. A woman walking a dog. 2 kids on bikes. The Tuesday world continuing on without any awareness of what had just been rearranged inside a parked car on a side street. I'm going to go home, I said. I'm going to plant the last of my winter garlic. I'm going to eat dinner. And I'm going to be the same man I was this morning. For how long? However long it takes, I said. Get me everything you can. And Patricia, find me the best forensic accountant in Charlotte. I already have someone in mind, she said quietly. Of course you do. I started the car. Raymond, she said before I could hang up. I'm still here. I'm sorry, she said, genuinely. I sat with that for a moment. So am I said. I drove home. If you've made it this far, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing and means everything to us. Thank you. Genuinely. I planted the garlic. 12 rows, German red variety. I pressed each clove into the prepared bed with my thumb, 2 inches deep, 6 inches apart, the way I had done every October for 9 years. It is a long patience crop. You put it in the ground in fall, and you do not see it again until June. You have to trust the process even when there is nothing visible to trust. I found that appropriate. Diana came out to the garden at 4 o'clock with 2 mugs of coffee. She sat on the low stone wall at the edge of the bed and handed me one. I took it. We talked about the neighbor's new fence, about whether the forecast was calling for frost, about a documentary she had watched while I was at the hardware store. I listened carefully. I asked follow-up questions. I laughed at the right moments. I was a perfect husband. Inside, I was a bridge engineer reading stress fractures, cataloging everything. The small hesitations before she answered questions about the weekend. The way she held her phone at a slightly different angle when a message came in. The single evening in the past week when she had stepped outside to take a call and come back in claiming it was her client's landscaping contractor. Gerald called on Sunday as he always did. I answered on the second ring. We talked for 22 minutes. College football. His car's transmission. My garlic. He asked how Diana was doing and I said she seemed well, same as always. And he said that was great. That was really great. Good to hear. I let the silence after that sentence sit for exactly 3 seconds. You doing all right, Gerald? I asked. Same as always, he said. Good, I said. Same as always. Patricia called the following Wednesday. 18 months of transactions, she said. I'm sending you the full report now. Raymond, there are 11 movements inside the trust during that period. The property sale accounts for the largest single transfer. But there are also 4 smaller disbursements. Maintenance fees to a management company that I cannot locate a registration for, legal fees to a firm I've never heard of, and 2 wire transfers to an account in Diana's name that is not the joint account I have on file. I sat at my desk in the study with the door closed. Outside, I could hear the television in the living room. Some cooking show Diana watched in the evenings. "How much in total?" I asked. "Across all movements, including the property sale?" $812,000. $800,000. 26 years of work. Careful, patient, deliberate accumulation. Moved out of my trust by the two people I had signed the authority to. "And the Asheville property," I said. "Who holds it now?" "That is the part I want you to hear clearly," Patricia said. "The property was purchased through a separate LLC registered in Gerald's name 8 weeks before the trust sale. The trust sale funded the LLC purchase. Raymond, Gerald effectively bought the property from your trust using your trust's money. He is now the sole registered owner of a $640,000 property that was paid for with your assets." The cooking show played softly through the closed door. "Patricia," I said, "what is our position?" "Strong," she said. "The independent action clause in your trust was designed for routine management decisions. A sale of a major asset of this magnitude, particularly one that resulted in a purchase that directly benefited a co-trustee personally, represents a clear breach of fiduciary duty. In North Carolina, that is actionable. I have spoken with Thomas Reeves at the forensic accounting firm. He agrees. How long to build the full case? With what we already have? 3 weeks to be thorough, 2 if we need to move faster." I looked at the wall in front of me. A photograph, framed. Diana and I at the Outer Banks, 7 years ago. She is laughing at something I had just said. I am looking at her like she is the most sensible thing in an uncertain world. 3 weeks, I said. Do it properly. I want to tell you something about the performance of a normal life. It is harder than it sounds. Not because the anger is difficult to suppress. I have spent 53 years being a patient man. Anger is not a stranger I don't know how to manage. The difficulty is in the tenderness. In the 22 years of small accumulated habits that do not know the marriage is over. The coffee mugs I still set out for 2 every morning without thinking. The side of the bed I still stayed on. The way I still turned down the television when she was on the phone, instinctively, without being asked. Those habits were the hardest part to navigate, because they were real. Whatever Diana and Gerald had built in the shadows, what I had built in the daylight was real. And the task of carrying both things at once, the reality of what I had loved and the truth of what it had cost me, that was the weight I did not fully anticipate. But I carried it, because I had built things that carried weight before. Patricia called on a Thursday evening with 4 days to spare. "We have everything," she said. "Thomas finished the forensic review this afternoon. Raymond, the picture is complete. I'm also going to tell you something that came out of the title search on the Asheville property that you need to hear." I put down the book I was not really reading. "Tell me." The LLC Gerald registered, Ridgeline Property Group, has 2 members. Gerald is the registered agent. The second member, holding a 49% interest, is listed as Diana Louise Gale. I said nothing for a moment. "She is on the LLC," I said. "She is," Patricia confirmed. "Which means the property purchased with your trust assets is jointly held by your wife and your brother inside a legal entity they formed together without your knowledge." I sat with that. It was not a surprise. Not really. It was the confirmation of a shape I had already traced in the dark. "Patricia," I said, "set the meeting, this Saturday. My house. I want Gerald there. I want Diana there. I want you there. And I want Thomas there with the full report." A pause. "Are you certain you want to do it at the house?" she said. "Yes," I said. "They've been making decisions in my house for 18 months. I want them to answer for it in my house." "All right," she said. "I'll make the calls." "One more thing," I said. "Don't tell them what the meeting is about. Tell Gerald I want to discuss a new investment opportunity inside the trust. Tell Diana it's a routine financial review." "And if they ask questions?" "They won't," I said. "They think I don't know anything. People who believe they are safe don't ask questions." Saturday came the way consequential days always do. Ordinary on the surface. The same light through the same windows. The same coffee maker making the same sounds in the same kitchen. Diana made breakfast. I ate it. I thanked her. Gerald arrived at 10. The same easy smile, the same two-handed handshake, same Sunday call voice transplanted into a Saturday body. He clapped me on the shoulder. He smelled like the same cologne he had worn since we were young men. "Raymond, good to see you, brother." "Come in," I said. "Coffee's on." Patricia arrived at 10:15. Thomas at 10:20, carrying a leather portfolio that was very full and very organized. We sat in the living room. Diana looked at Patricia across the coffee table with the specific, alert expression of a woman who has just noticed that the weather has changed. She looked at Thomas and his portfolio. She looked at me. I looked back at her pleasantly. Gerald picked up his coffee mug and held it with both hands the way a man does when he wants something to do with them. He looked at Patricia. "So what's the investment opportunity, Raymond? You said something about the trust?" "I did," I said. "Let's talk about the trust." I opened the folder on the table in front of me. "Thomas," I said. Thomas Reeves opened his portfolio. He was a compact, quiet man with reading glasses and the unhurried manner of someone who has presented difficult findings to difficult rooms many times before. He placed 3 bound documents on the coffee table, one in front of me, one in front of Patricia, and one in the center of the table where everyone could reach it. "This is a comprehensive forensic accounting review of the Gale Family Holdings Trust, covering a 24-month period ending this October," Thomas said. "It documents 11 transactions, totaling $812,000, executed through the Trust's independent action provision by co-trustees Diana Gale and Gerald Gale." The room was very quiet. Gerald set his coffee mug down on the side table, slowly, carefully. The sound it made was very small. Diana did not move. "On page 4, Thomas continued, "you'll find the documentation of the primary transaction, the sale of the Blue Ridge rental portfolio, executed without the knowledge or consent of the primary trustee, Raymond Gale, for $640,000. On page 9, you will find the title records for a property in Asheville, North Carolina, acquired through Ridgeline Property Group, LLC, registered to Gerald Gale, with Diana Gale holding a 49% membership interest, funded directly by the proceeds of the trust sale." Thomas removed his glasses, folded them, placed them on top of the portfolio. "In summary," he said, "the co-trustees of the Gale Family Holdings Trust used the independent action provision of that trust to liquidate a primary asset, transfer the proceeds through a series of intermediary accounts, and use those proceeds to purchase a property that is now personally held by the co-trustees themselves. This constitutes a textbook breach of fiduciary duty and, in this volume, satisfies the threshold for criminal charges under North Carolina General Statute." He closed the portfolio. The living room was completely silent. Outside, somewhere on the street, a car passed. Ordinary Saturday sounds. The world going on. Gerald looked at the document in the center of the table. He did not touch it. Diana was looking at me. Not at the documents. Not at Patricia. Not at Thomas. At me. And in her eyes, I had spent 22 years learning to read those eyes. I saw something I had not expected. Not calculation. Not performance. Something raw and old and tired. She looked like a woman who had been waiting for this room for a long time and was almost relieved it had finally arrived. "Raymond," she said. Her voice was quiet, stripped of everything practiced. "Let me finish," I said. She closed her mouth. "Patricia," I said. Patricia placed 2 documents on the table. "The first document," she said, "is a demand for the immediate return of $812,000 to the Gale Family Holdings Trust, secured by a lien against the Asheville property, effective as of this morning. The second document is a separation agreement, which Raymond has prepared and which I have reviewed. Diana, this gives you the joint checking account, your personal vehicle, and the contents of your studio. It releases all claims to the trust, the retirement portfolio, and this property. She slid both documents across the table. You can have your attorneys review these, Patricia said, but I want you to understand that the alternative to signing is a civil suit for breach of fiduciary duty and a referral of this evidence package to the Mecklenburg County District Attorney's Office, which Thomas and I are prepared to execute by Monday morning. Gerald looked at me for the first time since Thomas had begun speaking. His face was not angry. It was something worse, ashamed. He looked like a man seeing himself clearly for the first time in a long time and not surviving the view. "Raymond," he said. His voice came out thinner than I had ever heard it. "I need you to know." "Gerald," I said his name once, quietly. He stopped. "You called me every Sunday for 22 years, I said. "You gave the toast at my wedding. You are the only family I have left." I paused. "And I need you to understand that because of those things, I have spent 3 weeks deciding what to do with what I know. And what I have decided is that I am not going to send my brother to prison." Something moved across his face. "But I am also not your brother anymore," I said. "Not after this. That is the trade you made. I need you to understand that what you purchased in Asheville cost considerably more than $640,000. Gerald looked at the floor. He did not answer, because there was no answer. Diana signed the separation agreement at 11:47 a.m. Her hand was steady. She did not look at me while she signed. When she finished, she set the pen down and folded her hands in her lap and looked out the window at the garden, at the garlic beds. "I want you to know," she said quietly, still looking out the window, "that I didn't plan for it to go this far. That is not an excuse. I know it isn't. She stopped. "I want you to know." I looked at her profile. 22 years. "I know you didn't plan it," I said. "People rarely plan the thing that ends them. They just make one decision and then the next one. And then they look up and they have gone somewhere they cannot come back from." She was quiet. "Was any of it real?" I asked. Not with anger. With the genuine need to know, the way an engineer needs to understand why a structure failed. Diana turned from the window and looked at me. "Yes," she said, simply, without decoration. I nodded slowly. I believed her. That was the part that hurt the most. Gerald signed the lien agreement at noon. Patricia filed it electronically before either of them reached the end of the driveway. The Asheville property would be sold, the proceeds returned to the trust. With the interest and penalties Patricia had structured into the agreement, I would recover nearly everything. Not quite, but close. I stood in my kitchen after everyone had left. The coffee mugs were still on the table, 4 of them from the morning meeting. I washed them one at a time, set them on the drying rack. I looked out the kitchen window at the garden. 12 rows of garlic tucked into the ground, invisible, waiting. In June, they would come up strong and full and completely unhurried, the way things do when they have been given the right conditions and enough time. My phone was on the counter. I did not check it. I dried my hands on the dish towel, a blue linen one Diana had picked out at a farmer's market 2 summers ago, because she had said the color was the exact shade of early morning in July, and she wanted to see it every day. I folded it neatly over the oven handle. Some things you keep not because they don't hurt, but because they were real, and real things are worth keeping even when the story around them falls apart. I put on my jacket. I walked out to the garden. I stood at the edge of the garlic bed and looked at the 12 rows and thought about patience. About what it means to put something in the ground and trust it to come up correctly. About the difference between a bridge that holds and one that only appears to. Appearances had cost me $800,000 and 22 years. What I had built in the last 3 weeks had cost me considerably less and returned considerably more. I crouched down and pressed one more clove into the soil. I had one left from the morning's planting, tucked in my jacket pocket, forgotten until now. I pressed it in at the end of the last row, patted the earth flat. There, 12 rows and 1 extra. Raymond Gale walked back inside. The house was quiet now, genuinely quiet. The particular quiet of a space that has been cleared of things that were taking up room without giving anything back. It felt, for the first time in longer than I could pinpoint, entirely like mine. Some men build things to prove something. Raymond Gale built things because he understood that what you construct with patience and precision is the only thing that truly holds. He had just proven it. One more time. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being part of the channel. We'll see you next time.